Okay. All right, I'd like to call to order tonight's meeting of the Jersey Shore Area School District's April 11th, 2022 meeting. Could we have a roll call, please, Mr. Enders?
Mr. Allen. Mrs. Calhoun.
Here.
Ms. Dobler. Mrs. Edwards.
Here.
Mrs. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Kinley. Here. Mr. Petrosky.
Here.
Mrs. Stemler.
Here.
Mrs. Thomas. 8 members present, 1 absent.
Could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Before you do that, I'd like to invite Mr. Jean forward to introduce some students from Davis Elementary.
Good evening, Board. It gives me great pleasure to introduce 2 students from Avis Elementary School that will lead us in the pledge, and that is Jack Zelowitz and Crystal Stabley, if they would come up.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Oh, you will. Yeah, they did. Really good job.
Moving on to communications.
A couple updates under communication for the board. You should have at your seat the annual State of Education report from PSBA. I gave each of you a copy of that. It came this last week in the mail. There's a lot of really interesting data in here that PSBA compiled across the state through a survey format. So that is there at your seat. Also, I took all of the reports that you have received over time from Hunt Engineering and compiled them into one complete package. So this is all reports from them from beginning to end. All of the things they presented at board meetings you now have in one complete set. So those are all at your seats as well. And the last thing is, we did get just so that you're aware, in case it shows up in the media, I did get a call today from the borough, and at their meeting tonight, they're going to be discussing some of the streets in the borough that may cause us to have conversation. And I did add that today to the next capital projects agenda, because depending on where they pave streets, it may impact our own need to pave. For example, if they do Locust Street, there's a piece behind the middle school that we paved between the school and Locust Street that we may have to discuss that if they move in that direction. So I wanted the board to hear that from me. I did get that phone call just today, but it may be discussed in the public tonight at their meeting. So I just wanted you to be aware. That's everything.
All right. President's report. I just wanted to state that we had an executive session prior to the meeting at 5:45 for legal and personnel. And moving on to the intermediate unit report, Jesse.
For IU-17, I don't have anything that I can discuss at this time. They're just working on new programs that hopefully will be available for our district.
All right, thank you. Student representative report? Nothing tonight, okay. And superintendent's report.
I'm going to start by recognizing Mr. Enders to give the district-wide budget and district revenue presentation. Point out that it is also sitting at your seat.
Board, I also gave you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and I gave it to you with my talking notes, so please don't look at any grammatical or spelling issues. I wanted you to have the numbers and information I was going to speak to, so you weren't busy trying to write all those down at the same time. Yes, now is a great time to exit before we get into the fun budget information. Okay. Now, the question is whether or not I printed my own. Mom. So what I did with the district-wide and the revenue budget information, especially the district-wide, I tried to break it down into some of the main areas within the district-wide budget that the district-wide budget consists of. I would summarize the district-wide budget as consisting primarily of the salaries, the benefits of all the employees in the district, our charter school cost, transportation cost, and our debt service. There are certainly other areas within the district-wide budget, but I mean, the district-wide budget is just over $42 million. And as you can see, that's the majority of those costs. Going just down through those, like I said, you can see my talking points. Within salaries, the increase primarily is to the natural increases that are in the contracts. Plus, there are 5 new teaching positions in the 22-23 budget that were not in the 21-22 budget. 2 of those positions were hired prior to the start of this school year. Okay, so in next year's budget, there are 3 positions over and above our current staff load. Those are all elementary positions. And I gave you the number there, just salaries for those positions, that equates to just over $230,000. Okay? Benefits, I previously have already brought to your attention our PSERS rate. That was basically the first piece of information we received in this budget cycle. It's 35.26, an increase up from the current year of 34.94. And as I also previously brought to your attention, our health insurance went up 2.5%. Just as a reference, I read some notes from another IU. I only want to tell you what area it is because I'm not 100% sure. Their health insurance increased 8% this year. Charter school enrollment, a couple meetings ago, I brought that to your attention. We are not adjusting the charter school budget for next year. We did see a decrease in the enrollment. However, we are projecting an increase in our tuition rate. And I've listed the tuition rates comparably between this year and what's projected for next year for both regular ed and special ed. For me, attempting not to get on my soapbox, as you know, as I've told you before, charter school tuition costs, they don't matter. They don't care what the services are. They have 2 rates and only 2 rates. So they deem you either a regular ed student or a special ed student, and that's how much we get charged. Okay? Transportation funding, I have to wait until we get the transportation contracts to really dive into transportation. So Dr. Day and I spent several hours together last week discussing current year contracts, because that helps determine next year's revenue, and next year's contracts. So once those contracts were finalized, or at least presented to you, I know they're going to be board approved this evening, that gave me the opportunity to start diving into see what our costs were for next year. That's the primary basis to determine next year's cost. The other piece of that pie is the CPI, this Consumer Price Index. And as you all know, the CPI is through the roof this year. So next year's projected transportation contracts, which primarily is driven by CPI, is to go up 7%. That's what CPI is for next year in transportation. So that's the primary driver, what you're seeing there for the over $150,000 increase in transportation is being primarily driven by CPI. Now, the other piece of that pie is our subsidy is always 1 year in arrears. So we won't see the reimbursement from the Commonwealth for that increased cost until 23-24. Okay? Because next year's transportation subsidy is based on this year's cost. Okay? By the way, that CPI is the highest it's been since 1981. And if you don't believe me, PD has a nice chart on our website that you can print it off. That's where I got it from. Debt, I'm not going to really go into debt a whole lot. I brought you information on that, and last meeting PFM brought you information. Please know the most important thing for our community, for all you to know, is yeah, we're seeing a $300,000 decrease in our debt payments, but the net debt, when you net it against the reimbursement we receive, we're actually seeing a $200,000 increase, which Jamie brought that to our attention last meeting as well. Okay, and you'll see that again here shortly. Are there any questions regarding those costs or anything else within the district-wide budget? Next area we looked at was our revenue. The local revenue, the only thing I'm going to bring to your attention at this point in time is there is no increase in real estate taxes reflective in these local revenue numbers. The next slide, I'm going to get into some more detail of the local revenue, but I just want to let you know real estate taxes have not been adjusted. We'll be discussing those in May, and that's when we will make our determination of what to do, where we're going to go with real estate taxes, okay? State revenue, the primary adjustments with state revenue has been an increase, the basic ed funding, the CTE, our vocational ed funding, our special ed funding. We brought that up to the current year 21-22 levels. I'm pretty confident we will at minimum get flat funded. I believe we will get some sort of increase, but I did bring those up to our current year levels. This budget currently does not reflect any of the increases that was presented in the governor's budget in February. Okay, if we would take that into consideration, it's about an additional $1.67 million. That's the governor's presented budget. Okay. As I previously just told you, the other big adjustment in the state revenue is our debt service payments. Reimbursements have gone down about $500,000 in this budget. The federal revenue, there's very little adjustments there other than bringing them up to our current year levels. And then there's a slight increase in our ESERS money that we budget. This is the only ESERS money we're budgeting for at all is for our JSASD department. So the only little slight increase in there is just to reflect a slight increase in their overall cost. Okay. Let me repeat that again. The only ESERS federal stimulus money in our budget is for our JSASD department. And that's the only area we are spending that stimulus money on staffing. Everything else is basically project-based or extra, what did you call it? What would you call it, Dr. Almar? Extracurricular activity for summer
Yeah,
school?
there are some obligations to after-school and summer program, so we're doing them, but we're not reflecting that in the budget because it's coming right out of ESSER funds. It's additional programming that we weren't paying for before.
Are there any questions regarding those revenue areas?
When will you know, like, for the state revenue with the governor's budget? Like, you're just not putting that in there because we don't know.
It's been pretty historic that your budget has to be approved by June 30th, and there's been years when you had to approve a budget and had no idea what you were getting from the state.
Right, yeah. I thought when it was this last year that we might know for real by June 30th, but I don't know, you know? Okay,
We can always hope.
yeah.
The last area I wanted to bring to your attention is some call-out points on local revenue. Like I said, right now, local revenue does not reflect any adjustment for real estate taxes. The other primary areas where there is an adjustment is in earned income tax. We've increased the budget there by about $200,000. We're looking to project out that we will get $4.05 million this year in earned income tax. And I believe we will probably get that next year. Right now, we're averaging about $336,000 per month for the past 5 years in earned income tax. When you base that out, you get about 4.05. We are down from the $4.4 million that we realized in the 2021 school year. The next area we did a slight uptick to was the real estate transfer tax. This was just a modest $25,000 increase. We have at least received $225,000 over the past 2 years. However, I am concerned about the current real estate market with rising interest rates, whether or not that's going to, the turnover and the selling of houses is going to continue at the feverish pace that we've seen the past 2 years is interesting to me. So I am willing to go up, I think, by a modest $25,000, but I would be concerned if we would go much higher than that just because of what I believe the pending interest rate hikes will be and the impact it might have on the housing market. Last area is interest. So with the rising interest rates, I am hopeful that we will be able to meet our budget and potentially exceed our budget. However, I did have to decrease the budget for next year, as I don't anticipate we are going to make budget this year. Right now, at the end of February, we had about $80,000 of interest. I'm projecting we will get up to about $112,000 this year. So I did not drop it all the way down to that level because I do believe we will have an opportunity to invest coming up soon. But I didn't want to take the risk and keep it at the current $150,000 budget amount that we were, so I did drop it by $20,000. That also considers the fact that our checking account, with the approval that we just had, the floor did decrease on that down to 0.7 from our current level 1. So I did take that into consideration. The T-bill rate, which is what drives our rate, has gone up 0.5% in 3 months from January to March. So I'm hopeful that we won't be at the floor. And if we are, I'm hopeful we're not there for a long period of time and that we will keep at least our 1%. We did have an opportunity to invest at the end of March. I did not take it because I believe the feds will be raising rates somewhere between 1/4 and maybe close to 0.5% the first week of May. That's when the next scheduled reserve meeting is. And I think at that point in time, we may take the opportunity to invest some money. Any questions regarding those local revenue areas? Like I said, I kind of tried just to kind of point out some of the bigger areas within these budgets. I know there's a lot of money sitting here, but I tried to kind of pinpoint to the local areas. Regarding percentages and what our salaries and benefits is of the overall budget, I will be providing you, Dr. Ulmer and I met last week, and we decided we're not going to go slide by slide through the whole budget presentation as we did in the past, which is all the charts and graphs, but we will be providing that to you in a hard copy and PDF. So I can tell you the salaries and benefits is 70% of the budget. Huh? Are there any other questions?
So, budget as presented right here, revenue at 43.3 million versus expenses of 42 million. Am I reading that right?
Well, I think you're pointing out just the district-wide budget. You're asking for the current status of the overall budget.
Yes.
Revenue is at 43.3 million and expenditures are at 44.8 million. We are just short of a $1.5 million deficit.
Okay,
currently.
thank you.
Yep.
Oh, one more question. As far as you projected the local, state, and federal revenue, will you be able to present maybe at the next meeting the projected expenditures for this year?
I am working on compiling that.
Okay.
I'm having some difficulty getting some of the information I need. I'm probably about 90% done.
Okay.
I can tell you right now, I would tell you right now, I believe we're going to be real close to flat. As I said to you last year, 1% swing is $400,000. So I could see us between being flat and a 250 deficit.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Thank you.
I'm going to draw your attention to letters B, C, and D on my report. They are all attached. Letter B, the flexible instructional days MOU. This is the same exact language that you approved last year. If you remember, we did 1 year at a time. This would be the 3rd year that MOU would be in effect. That is with the association and their obligation to work on those flexible instructional days. We didn't change anything in conversation with the association. All I did was change the dates for the next school year. It is attached to the agenda. Let me know if you have questions. But this should be, hopefully, the last time we have to approve this separately, because at the end of 22-23, we will need a new contract, and my intent is to roll this language to the association contract at that time. Letter C, virtually the same conversation. We did agree last year to do that for the 21-22 school year. So in order to do it again for another year, we have to agree to a subsequent MOU with them. The language did not change, only the dates changed. This is the MOU that we put into place so that our teachers can have a period of their day identified as they are the teachers of JSASD courses. And we already have some of that happening in the high school. We're looking to expand it next year, but all under this MOU language. Do you have a question?
I do.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Nancy.
So when this goes in with the next contract or whatever, will we think about expanding it down to the middle school and elementary level? On this one here?
The way that it's worded, it could be, but the pilot was to start, the way the language was written, we were starting at the high school because it was the easiest place
Right.
to identify a period of a teacher's day that we could free them up and have them teach courses. But it could be expanded down to the middle school and elementary school, I believe, with a slight, we would have to change language slightly
Right.
because it's targeted at high school.
So when do you think that we're going to be able to do that, though, with the next
It would
contract or
have to be
not?
with the next contract.
Okay.
I want to go back to letter B.
Okay.
I am very concerned about the lack of teaching that is involved with these FID days. They are counted as instructional days, but there's no instruction being held. And whereas if it was a makeup day, then they would be back in the brick and mortar where I feel that kids thrive better. Reading through this, it does say that the teachers are available from these hours. I just feel like this is a very hands-off approach. And if we're going to go hands-off, then it should just be considered a snow day and that they have to make it up.
That is, we did change the language going into 21, 22 to tighten it up more than it was the first year. We didn't talk about any additional language. So both B and, well, actually all three. I did present all three of these to the association, and the association has approved them. So if we don't want to move forward with that language, we would have to go back and ask them if they would like to change the language. Or we could move it forward for 1 year and then bargain different language in the contract.
I don't feel that it's appropriate that our teachers are getting paid to do nothing for a day that is being counted as an instructional day. Like that is a day that is built into their contract that they're getting paid for, and our students are not being taught.
But, I mean, I think some of the teachers, maybe the majority of the teachers do instruction during that time.
Well, then I would like to see proof of that, knowing for a fact and talking to others in the district, especially the elementary school level, that is not the case.
Isn't it required that they do so much work on their flex days? Aren't there packets at home that they have to do if they don't have access to the internet or, yeah, there is.
If they don't have
there is-
access to the internet, but if a child is living in the middle of Avis and gets sent home a 2-page packet, that is not equivalent to 8 hours of work.
But they still have to do work and log in on their computers, and they do.
They don't. They have
I
not.
don't know about that.
Maybe
don't
it
know.
depends on the teacher, but they did.
Yeah.
Mine did not. Exactly. So I don't know if there should be different wording then for building or different, because, I mean, my kid's in first grade. Obviously, she can't do a lot, but there was no communication via Teams, via. So I just feel like it should be something that is held to standard across the board. If a senior high student in 12th grade is made to get on Teams so they can be counted that day, then so should a kindergartner.
I have a question. If they don't log in though, isn't it counted as a sick day or a day off school? Don't they have to log in?
They
There's
have to
proof
be-
if they're there or
They
they're
have
not.
to either be there or have done the work. We have to have something to account for their attendance. So it sounds to me like what has to happen is not necessarily language change, but clearer and supervised expectations.
Possible.
Well, the teachers are submitting attendance reports, and that actually is in the language. We are having, the principals can monitor them and check their submitted reports.
So I guess I'm concerned that they're not getting the equal education. Like, obviously, like I said, my child is sent home a packet of 2 papers. That's how she is, when she hands that in, that is how she is being counted present. But, 10 minutes of a 2-page worksheet versus being in school for a full day, getting all the subjects, the interaction with the teacher.
I don't disagree. I'll just say clear expectations on my part and supervision.
Thank you.
I do think the part you have to remember, though, is we are a remote area. We are doing something to help with that. We're just waiting actually to hear from whoever it is from the federal grants that will be able to put buses that have district Wi-Fi in various places. Days off that people want to drive 40 minutes to a school
Right.
to attach to them, but there are still going to be people who are in areas that may not have access to get.
That's when a full day off would help that, that they're not recommended to do remote, that they would get that extra day of learning from the makeup day.
Question. Letter D, that is actually the dates. You approved the athletic handbook that included potential dates that you would like to see differently for extracurricular pay dates. We put them in there with a note on that said it was pending approval with of an MOU with the association. They have agreed to that, so I listed that. I took that section out and drafted it as an MOU for them, and that's what I attached to the agenda. They have agreed to that, and there were, as I provided to the board, only a couple changes. There were the March dates they felt shouldn't be at the end of March because most winter seasons ended by the beginning of March. So we made it the first pay date in March instead of the second pay date in March. That's the only change that happened after you approved that handbook. So I'm putting that back on to point that out to you, and then we would have to approve that at a future meeting. Questions about that? The last thing is policy, draft of policy 823. We actually were contacted by the county. Mrs. Morlock, our head nurse, was contacted by the county. They will provide naloxone at no cost to the district. However, you can't have it here and you can't use it unless you have a policy in place authorizing the nurses to dispense it. So the draft policy is actually straight from PSBA's version of what they propose should be used as a draft policy for schools. Notice it does require training. It's not like we can just have it and tell our nurses they can use it. They have to be trained. They have to have your authorized policy permission to use it. And all that needs to be in place before we can accept that donation. Questions about that?
So when and how are they getting the training?
There are trainings available, but what we did in the policy was memorialize that they have to be trained. The trainings are pretty much usually free and virtual, but they can't have it until there's policy in place and they're trained before we can use it in the building or have it available.
Something that we need.
Well,
We have kids that are diabetic out there that this is not being provided. I just ask if this is something that
no,
we need.
this is not diabetic medication.
No, I realize that,
Oh.
but I'm saying that you have kids out there with
I
many
see
different
what
health
you're
conditions. And I just don't know if this is something that we need.
It really just came up because it was offered to us, that if there were, and I would say, I don't know that there's a severe need for it, but our concern is, if there ever was, and we didn't have it, at least for, at this point, it's being provided free, but we can't accept it if we don't have the policy.
Is there a shelf life to this stuff? Like, if we got it now and didn't use it for 5 years, would we be wasting it?
I would say yes, but I wouldn't say we were wasting it because most of the time, if you have a policy in place and you're permitted to have it, there are definitely places like what we're seeing now that you can get it for free often.
They replenish it if it expires.
Okay, thanks.
Does our officer have that available on him?
Yeah.
He does.
They do.
No question.
Thank you. Next is courtesy of the floor. Those who have signed up, can you please state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes to speak on an item that is on the agenda for this evening. The first person that signed up is Mr. Bob Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Bob Pryor, Mifflin Township. Item A under F. I know what these floor scrubbers are, but my concern with the school district is these big ticket items. And with these two autonomous scrubbers, along with the fobs that were approved a couple meetings ago, it appears the district seems to be looking for convenience versus working. I don't know, maybe there's a problems getting people to do the janitorial services or not. I don't know. If there is a problem, I think you need to rectify it. But I know this is by grants, but just because we have grants is no reason just to spend the money. I think we could use that somewhere else that would benefit the students. Warranty or not, we will eventually pay for those items. So I just ask you to try to keep the spending down, because there was a time, and some board members were on the board at that time, when we ended up with $5,000 in the general fund. And we had to go to court to raise taxes 26%. I just want you to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Next is Mr. Bert Francis.
Good evening, Bert Francis, 1425 Locust Street, Jersey Shore, PA. Spent a bigger part of my life as a contractor, builder, dealing with architects, engineers, bidding, going to pre-bids, going to bid openings, and I've never seen one quite like, and I'd like to ask a couple questions under, I think it's under M, D, a motion to approve and accept the amendment to the final guaranteed energy saving agreement. And we have a number in there, $2,524,591. What does that number represent? Does that number represent labor and material, just material, or labor?
If you look at that agenda item, it says labor, material, equipment, and installation.
Okay, so we can't break that number out then as to, I've requested this information prior to this evening. We can't break this number out into labor and material, because the last meeting, when the representative, I think the representative from Site Log was here, I think the last meeting, and spoke about this, and we were talking that evening, we talked 1 million for the boilers, et cetera, and then 1 million for labor. Am I correct or incorrect on that?
following you, Mr. Francis. I broke this down for the board, and I did include in the approval tonight that this number includes labor, material, equipment, and installation.
Okay, I'll buy that, yeah. But what I'm trying to do is break this labor cost out versus material cost. I understand that we've purchased the material to do all this. Is that material on site, or is it here yet, or yeah, who pays for that? Do we, the government? How do we get our money? I've never seen anything go the way this bid process is going here from A through where we are right now. When somebody received information from the government, we were going to get $3 million, correct? Through COVID. Correct, for this project. What did we get from the government? Did we get instructions from the government how we could spend that money? Did the board receive any documentation what your requirements were on spending and handling of this money and how it was supposed to be done? Who managed all this up front? Did this come through Capital Projects Committee? Did this come through the board? How did we get from A to where we are now? Most other contracts that I've ever been involved with or whatever, this goes through quite a procedure. You go out, you see a bid, you go, you buy the blueprints, you have a pre-bid conference with the architects, you sit down and go over the project so the contractors can make a contribution to the project to show things that will help the project to save money, et cetera, and then you go back and do another bid, and then you go to a bid. I've done those things right here, 10 bid openings right here in this room, pre-bid meetings, so on. Did we do any of those things when we were coming up with these prices? How did we get these prices?
Mr. Francis.
What information did the board get? Who was providing the board with information?
Mr. Francis, you're out of time.
I don't have my hearing aids.
Your 3 minutes are up. Your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Good nerve,
Mr.
I'll keep
Francis.
tonight.
Next is Mr. Schweitzer.
Merle Schweitzer, 325 Job Run Road, Stolleysburg. A quick question on the budget presentation. What's the fund balance at right now? Is it 4 million? And then while you're looking that up, I'm interested in the tuition costs for Pennsylvania Online. I think we have about 120 students signed up for Pennsylvania Online Learning. What's the tuition cost per student per year on that? And also, what's the tuition cost for our J School students?
Mr. Schweitzer, current fund balance is $5.25 million.
Okay,
That takes into consideration the $250,000 the board transferred to capital projects earlier in February.
okay. What about the PA?
Are you referencing our charter school rate, tuition rate?
No, I'm not talking about charter school. I'm talking about Pennsylvania Online Learning. I think we have about 120 students signed up for that.
I don't know what Pennsylvania Online Learning is.
Well, maybe there's a Pennsylvania Online, maybe it's another name, but
Is
it's
that's
an
a,
online
there's a PA,
learning that a lot of the 120 of our students have signed up to, okay?
I think you're referencing the charter school rate.
No, I am not. The charter school is something else. That's 70 students at whatever it is, 14 and 24,000 a student. This Pennsylvania Online, there's 120 students, and I understand that the tuition cost is $24,000 a year. I got that information from you a long time ago, and I just wondered what the status of that is.
So just to be clear, Mr. Schweitzer, there's one charter school rate for all the charters in the entire Commonwealth.
And that includes the Pennsylvania.
Yes, it doesn't
Online.
matter if it's an online charter, or it doesn't matter if it's a brick and mortar charter, it's all the
Okay.
same rate.
Okay,
So I will tell you that the current regular ed rate this year for charter school is just below $12,500 for regular ed, and for special ed, it's just above $26,600.
it's up to 26, okay,
Okay?
all right.
And like I said, that doesn't matter if it's an online charter or a brick and mortar charter, that's the same tuition rate. They all get paid the same amount of money.
So anyway, when you look at the total number of students, about 120 on one and then 70 at the charter school, and you multiply that out, you get up, what, almost 2 million, maybe?
Yeah,
in tuition
3.3
costs.
million.
Okay. Did you start the time yet? That was, oh my goodness. I'm on item M, the subject that Mr. Francis was talking about, that 2,500,000 agenda item kind of got my attention. And I'm recommending that when we get to that the board president read this motion completely and slowly so all the taxpayers can hear this. And I have quite a few questions about this.
Your time is up, Mr. Schweitzer.
Yeah, okay, don't rush me. I'm interested in the scope of the work. I'd like to see a list, a breakdown list of what the costs are and what the items are and then what the cost is by items for the 2,500,000. I know, the other thing is, you indicated that you
Mr.
may not have
Schweitzer.
enough money, but you're going to take the money out of the fund balance.
Mr. Schweitzer, you
How
need to
much
take
money
your
you-
seat,
I hear
please.
you, thank you.
Thank
I wonder
you.
how much money are you planning to take out of the fund balance to come up, to cover that 2.5 million?
Moving on to personnel. Looking to approve items A through F. Can I have a motion, please? In a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any questions or comments?
I have a question on F. It says prorated for 22-23 school year. Should that say 21-22?
Good catch. It should say 21, 22.
Thank you.
Are we okay to amend
As
your
amended.
motion?
Yes.
Correct. Mr. Allen as amended. Second as amended.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Under curriculum and instruction, looking to approve item A. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you. And a second? Thank you, Mr. Kinley. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Under building and grounds, looking to approve item A. Can I have a motion, please? And a second?
I'll second, but I also have a question. Do we currently have any of these types of devices in our district?
We have floor scrubbers, but they are ride-on. And as what Mark presented to the board is in especially in our larger buildings, we have custodians who are riding floor scrubbers 6 to 8 hours of their shift. So our goal was to free up more custodial time by replacing those ride-on scrubbers with robotic scrubbers, essentially. So you do own some scrubbers, but they all require someone to ride on them and operate them at the moment.
And are we currently seeking more custodial
So
staff?
we have one, I believe Mr. Wall presented last time. We have 2 vacancies. We are currently interviewing, but we do still have a couple openings.
Thank you.
I don't recall, when he made that presentation, does that affect, staffing at all? I know it obviously releases.
We weren't intending to reduce staff by using these because we were hoping to be able to push staff into other areas that they don't necessarily have time for every day by freeing up those people that are riding scrubbers.
I think it's safe to bring up as well that we've had to move people around due to shortages of subs for some of these positions as well, which has created quite a strain.
But overall, do we see any cost savings as far as subs or otherwise? I mean, I'm guessing we did not reduce our regular contingent of custodial staff. But, I mean, is there any relief as far as any cost savings?
I would say I can't answer that without seeing them at work, because it won't be an exact 1-to-1, because while there won't be someone riding it, someone does have to periodically check it and turn it on and move it around occasionally. So it's not I'm going to take a 6-hour shift person off of a scrubber and no one's ever going to have to look at the robotic scrubber, but it will I think we'll see some efficiencies.
What I'd like to see is maybe after we vote to approve these, that we have a report from Mark that can quantify in some fashion the benefit that by making this purchase.
I have a question. This was voted on before I was on the board. And I remember at the meeting, he said that it takes a cell phone to use it.
Or an iPad, which they are issued district devices.
Okay, so they're going to use it as an iPad, not a cell phone. Okay, my question was about, would they have a district phone that the school paid for?
They would have a district iPad.
Okay, district iPad. And second, Williamsport doesn't have these. The Williamsport School District, they don't have these kind of floor cleaners. They have the ones like we have currently. And I asked, do they have the same problems we have, like breaking down? And, they don't have the lack of employment, but they have the same issues of repairs and those maintenance things. But when that happens, they're told they're to use a mop and a bucket. So that's Williamsport. We're not Williamsport, are we?
Nope.
Nope. So I guess that was my question, was the extra cost for the cell phones. And it's an additional cost for the upgrades, because just like any device, you have the upgrades, like the new programs, like a mechanic has their electronic devices to check certain vehicles, and the newer vehicles require a new chip and a new chip for it to function. If not, it won't work. Is that also?
My understanding is it's just a different app on the iPad.
At no cost?
Right.
Okay. All right. That was all my questions.
I have a question. What does the warranty look like that comes with this?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't have that with me. I believe Mark presented that before. I can go back and look. I can get you that answer. 3 years.
Covers everything.
According to Mark, 3 years.
Thanks, Mark. That was quick.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Under Finance, looking to approve items A through F. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Dr. Elmer, can you take time to explain to the public about this donation from Ms. Jill Snyder's estate, please?
Yes, I was just pulling it up. Jill Fuller Snyder is a Jersey Shore graduate. I believe in my research, we found class of 1954. She left a substantial donation to the district. Unlike the last scholarship the district received, the will was pretty clear. We have very clear criteria in terms of what major the student has to be going into. We got very clear direction that there is a trustee, which after the board accepts the donation, I got contact information today from the family's attorney and permission to contact the trustee, who is a local resident. The will says that the trustee has sole authority to pick the bank to put the money into. We did a little bit of research to see that Jill was a very involved Jersey Shore student. She actually lived in New York before she passed away. There are a number of charities in New York that benefited from this donation, as well as the school district and Penn College, because at one point she was an instructor at Penn College before she moved to New York. So what you're seeing on the agenda is your acceptance of the donation. And then after it's formally accepted, I will contact the trustee and get her permission of where to put the funds. And there is some paperwork that I have to sign. And I did talk to the executor today, and he said she was very excited to talk to us and get this process underway. It very clearly states that we are only permitted to spend the interest every year on that scholarship. So essentially the bank will just tell us each year, you have this much money to give out as a scholarship, and we just have to meet the family's criteria for what that scholarship student is going into college for.
Do you anticipate it would be more than one student that would get the scholarship, or just one?
I think that's going to be up to the trustee, but it will be based on probably each year a decision based on how much the actual interest on the money is.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
What's that? It's up to you. I can help if you want.
Under miscellaneous, we're looking to approve items A through D. Can I have a motion, please?
A motion.
I'll second.
Mhm.
A through D. Before the board has any questions or comments, I was going to actually ask our representatives from Site Logic if you could come to the podium for us and answer any questions that the board might have or expand a little bit on what it is that we're looking to approve this evening.
Okay.
Before you start, I do want to clarify for the board, if you remember, we discussed before, there are 2 million in ESSER funds. You've spent $1 million already, so you would have another $1 million in grant funds that were coming out of this total. I did ask the Federal Programs Office a question because there are some things that we committed to those in that other pot of 3.7 million that, as we've seen expenses not be what they are, what we anticipated. For example, the scrubbers were budgeted 150,000. So we didn't spend 150,000. I'm asking, can I go back and do a budget revision for things and put more money into that HVAC project so you're above the $2 million? So I'm already having that conversation, just so the board is aware, but the agenda was worded the way that it was worded so that you're taking the remaining, whatever we don't take out of the grant, out of fund balance.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Brookhart.
I'm Wayne Brookhart. I'm a consultant with Site Logic. I'd like to extend apologies from Damian Spar. He's been here and spoken with you several times. He had a pre-existing commitment he just had to fulfill, so I'll represent Site Logic tonight. We've really enjoyed the opportunity to get to know all of you. This is a Guaranteed Energy Savings Act project, and we've been involved in some discussions with you for probably the better part of 9 to 10 months now, I believe. Commend you on your diligence and really enjoyed working with Hunt, getting us to this point. As I think Damian said to you back on March 28th, we hate to deliver the news we're delivering about the increase in prices. We're delivering it all over the state. All vendors and contractors are. Unfortunately, and fortunately, the federal government has infused public schools with an awful lot of money, and a lot of districts are spending it on the same things, which has created a demand curve that goes like this and a supply curve that's like this, and that results in increased prices. We do not see this project being completed at any lower level within the ESSERS window. The ESSERS window, I think Mr. Enders ends in September 2024. Is that correct? I thought you would be probably the best person to ask, but I think ESSERS money needs to be expended by
2023.
2023, okay. You're looking at a year at this point. So we really believe that you're probably at the best price point you're going to get. You're going to see a guarantee of $380,000 in energy savings out of this. The GISA project requires us to make those projections. That would be another increased benefit. We think it's a valuable project. Love to work with you. I'm available to answer any questions that I can. I'm not an engineer, but I have a pretty good handle on school finance and projects. I was a superintendent of Berwick for 13 years. Take taxpayer money very seriously. We didn't raise the millage there for my entire tenure as a superintendent. So anything I can answer for you, that's why I'm here.
Does the board have any questions?
I'm just going to, if you'll indulge.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mr. Francis had a question about the whole bidding process, because it is a GISA project and there's very strict requirements that come along with being able to be a GISA project.
Right.
There's no requirement to actually go out through the formal bidding process because they're already qualified to handle a GISA project. And once that project is developed, as long as they can prove all of meet the requirements of the statutes relative to that, they're allowed to be approved by the board.
Right. Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, we serve as your single prime. All contractors work under us. We reached out to multiple contractors. We found some pretty good vendors. A lot of them weren't interested because it was quick and it was surgical. And I think you're aware of a lot of districts doing projects right now that are much longer, and they're committed to those projects. The ones we found, we think are very good contractors. We do GISA projects throughout the state. We're working with, or have worked with, at least 130 districts across the state. We're working on updating that list now. We're a large company. you want a comparison of the GISA versus the traditional design bid build, the benefit of the GISA, there's no change orders. This number will not go higher. We've already identified some savings or it'll go lower. And we're going to keep looking for that. We'll either return money if we find it through credit or reduction in costs, but you will not see any change orders unless you sit here in an open public meeting, get a motion, a second, and a positive vote to change the scope of the project. So that's a great benefit of a GISA. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Read that bottom.
Am I reading it because we can't see it or because you're trying to? Talk about this?
Yeah, I requested information and that was the answer I got on that particular item. What, can you break this cost down, labor and material?
Well, yeah, that's the information. that
Yeah,
we
I
have.
did provide that to the
Right.
board and I provided it to the board, Mr. Francis. You
Yes.
don't sit on the board. Yep. File a right to know request. I will provide it to you.
Too late now. I'm not gonna get in a debate with you, but I'd love to get in a debate with you on this. We are the people, no matter federal government, state, whatever, the money still comes from the people. And we're entitled to know. I would ask, and I know at the last meeting, you folks said we were at about $1 million on materials and $1 million on labor. Well, that's unusual to see a match at any given project, correct? So I would ask Mr. Ernst, just take that $1 million at $100 an hour and tell me how many hours.
Mr. Francis, you'll have an opportunity at the end to address the board again. We're going to move on. Are there any other questions or comments
Members?
from the board to Wayne?
Hi.
Hi.
Refresh my memory. The project would start immediately after school ends for the year, correct? And it guaranteed, all done, ready for the kids to go to school.
I believe our guarantee is to finish it by heating season. I think we may move into September, but we'll do everything to stay away from areas where the kids are, even do second shift work if we need to. Heating season in Pennsylvania would be considered about the second week of October.
But there is a timeline.
Yes. Yes, that's established. The schedule's already set.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of this work is not done in the classrooms either. A lot of it, I believe we're doing 10 classrooms, but the rest is in some of those larger common areas. So we'll work around what happens with the kids. And we shouldn't be here much longer than, or soon after the start of the school year. We should be completing the project. It's quick surgical, we call it. It's not a large project, but we'll be in a tight timeline.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you remind me the savings or the time length for the $380,000 savings? How
That's over
long?
the 20-year period. Yeah, now you may find some companies that'll calculate those differently. Essentially, we're all finding the same savings in it, but we may calculate it. Some will extrapolate the numbers. If you would purchase the equipment 20 years later, it costs a significant amount more. We don't do it that way. We're going to give you the most conservative estimate. So the minimum you will see is $380,000. No disrespect to those companies. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. I'm sorry.
Do you know what the life expectancy is like of these boilers? Like the ones we've had for 50 years? I mean, I
Dinosaurs?
don't know. Right, yeah.
They'll be much more efficient. The exact life expectancy, I'm assuming 25 to 30, it could be more. Again, I'm not an engineer. I can't
Right.
get real specific in
But
those
it's
things.
more than
but
15?
Generally, the expectation for this type of job is 25 to 30 years for equipment.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one more.
Sure.
Will you finish one school, complete that, and then move on to the next one? Or are you going to come in and just go crazy?
I'm making an assumption on this. That's the engineers. I'm assuming they'll be working simultaneously on both. I think that's probably the quickest way to work our way through and get the efficiency that we need in terms of our workers. But I'd have to verify that with Damien.
All right, thank you.
That's an assumption. Really, that's Damien's territory.
Any other questions? Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you again.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Those that are opposed? Motion passes. There's nothing under old business, so we're moving on to courtesy of the floor. If you'd like to comment to the board, please state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes.
Sorry, Army got ahead of you. Bob Pryor, Mifflin Township. Concerning the proposed 22-23 budget, I'm asking again, show me the logic. Why are we even considering adding any new positions with educators when the student population is way down and probably will continue because everybody's moving out of the area? We have lost 1 congressional seat already in Pennsylvania. You need to work with what we have. That means reconfiguring classes and utilizing the good buildings we have and closing the inefficient facilities. We can't unnecessarily waste our tax dollars. Jersey Shore is the only school district in Lycoming County that still refuses to reconfigure grade levels. Why? What do you know that the other districts don't? At the last capital projects meeting, the president of this board, Mrs. Thomas, admitted she could remember when the high school had over 1,200 students and now has around 700. That's space for 500 more students to be moved in to that school. Doesn't it make sense? How would you run your residence? You know, when your kids are growing up and moved out and you have those extra rooms to heat and cool, what are you going to do? You're going to leave the heat up 72 degrees in every room and air condition every room when they're gone? Come on, use your common sense. Also, we need to hear discussion from the board on these matters and the feasibility study. We want to hear our representatives' comments on what they believe and feel about that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Just want to recap this summer project. We're going to be replacing 3 boilers in the high school.
Mr. Schweitzer, just please state your name for the record.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Merle Schweitzer,
Okay, thank you.
325 Jobs Run Road, Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania. Just want to recap this project that we've been discussing. My understanding is we're going to replace 3 boilers in the high school. We're going to replace 3 boilers in the middle school. We're going to replace 6 unit ventilators, I think, in the high school.
10.
What?
10.
10 unit ventilators, okay. And then you're going to replace some rooftop units in the senior high school, only in the senior high school, right? Just over the gym, and there's I think,
Cafeteria and auditorium.
and the auditorium. And the plan is to replace all this equipment during this summer and have it completed by the time we go back to school. Is that correct?
Correct. That's exactly what the company has said.
Do we have a company yet who's going to actually take the boilers out and install the new ones? Do we have a contractor that's going to do that? Who is it?
That's all been handled by our prime contractor, which is SiteLogic. They hold all the contracts
Okay.
for the subcontractors.
Okay. So after tonight, after the approval of this motion, when can the contractors begin working?
They will begin working as soon as school is over.
As soon as school is over. You're not concerned about meeting the deadlines. You're not concerned about having this all done and functioning by the first day of school. I have a concern about that. I don't think it's possible, but I'm not the expert. But I am expressing my concern about that. How do you feel, Dr. Ulmer? You don't have any, you don't have any bad, you're not apprehensive about this.
No?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer.
Bert Francis, 1425 Locust Street, Jersey Shore, PA. And so, back to my original question, and Mr. Schweitzer and others, and I was always taught when I was a young man that never shoot my mouth off before my brains were loaded. So I've always tried to do that, load my brains before I shoot my mouth off. And I might get shot down tonight, lack of, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. I raised questions relative to this project simply because I've never seen a project managed or handled in the manner this one has in all my career. And boy, I've gone through hundreds of them, bidding, the whole process and everything else. So I've never been familiar with us giving a prime contractor the go-ahead to go out and get bids and everything else without having documentation, et cetera, on what the government has told us to do. I don't know if you people saw, where we got instructions from the government, whatever. So I'm just going to put my glasses on, and I have gotten answers to different questions through different sources. And bottom sentence in this last report I got from the superintendent, he says, I am positive that you can find documents on which prevailing wage rates require. Correct?
Yep, because you were
Correct.
asking me about prevailing wage rates.
That's
My
correct.
answer was,
Right.
they're
That's it.
government driven. I have to pay the prevailing wage rates.
I'm very familiar. I paid for prevailing, I've made prevailing wages too. Everybody likes prevailing wages. That's big bucks, yeah. So what I'm saying is, we're talking about the total cost of a project, and we're trying to cut time, make schedules, and so on and so forth. So I have no way to determine labor hours unless somebody gives me an idea what part of what you're saying. You give me a lump sum contract amount here. It's a lump sum. It's not separated specifically like our budget is, debit, credit, whatever. Any contract I ever did was labor and material. All I need to know is somebody give me an idea what the average prevailing wage is for this job. What is the average prevailing wage for this job? And then I would ask, and I would throw out a number and say, you people can do it too. This, if you want to know, to meet a schedule. How do you know whether we're going to meet a schedule or not till somebody tells you how many man hours and days we have? We're just talking piecemeal here now and say, oh yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to, who knows how many, what size crew, how many man days, and so on a document. What are we using, the critical path method? Are we using the critical path method to determine the timeline on this, or how we determine? Okay, that's a legitimate question. Okay, and I'm positive last meeting these folks broke down and said we had $1 million worth of material, and we were looking at $1 million, maybe a little over, for the cost of labor. All right, just get your calculators out. If that's similar, if I can start there, Mr. Kinley, you're the money guy. Take $1 million, just $1 million, break that down, $100 an hour. How many man hours is that?
Mr. Francis, I apologize. Your time is up. Right here.
Thank you very much for not answering my question. Aren't you concerned about having something that you can determine? We want to know how many days it's going to take to do this job, don't we?
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else during courtesy of the floor? All right, we're going to close courtesy of the floor. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Joanne and Angela. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much and enjoy your evening.